overnight.
Yeah.
Just gonna dump on us.
Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah, he's hoping.
Yeah, pause it.
Hey, welcome to this plan commission. It's 5:33, so we'll call this regularly scheduled meeting to order. Our pledge allegiance will be led by Commissioner Call, and he'll also give us the opening comments. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our Father in heaven, we're thankful to be here at this planning commission meeting today. We're grateful to be able to live here in Santa Clara. We're thankful for the beautiful weather that we're enjoying. We ask you to bless us that we can make good choices that'll benefit the members of our community. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Hey, follow on to item number 3, communications and appearances. We have any of those tonight?
We do not.
Okay, moving on to, this is item 4A. There's no public hearings tonight, so moving on to item 5, general business. Some plan commission approval items. So to item 5A1, Roxbury Juice Co. wall signs located at 3542 Pioneer Parkway, Suite 101. Ethan Moon, applicant with the sign guys. Turn the time for presentation of this item.
Thanks, Commissioner Blake. I'll go ahead and go through this one. The applicant's Ethan Moon with the sign guys. I don't know if he's on the call for this item or not. I know our next applicant for the next sign is on our Zoom call. But I'll go ahead and cover this. It's pretty straightforward. This is actually the last tenant that's going to be going into retail Pad A at the Harmon Center. It's a proposal for wall signs for Roxbury Juice Company. You can see the different signs that they're proposing here. They show a menu board, but that's not something that is reviewed by Planning Commission. It's the wall signs because it's in the PDC zone. Let's go to the drawings of the signs themselves. So this is the front elevation facing east or interior towards Harmon's. And so as you know, the code allows 10% of the wall area to be in signage. On this particular wall, they calculated that 79 square feet would be allowed, and they're showing a wall sign of 54 square feet. This sign includes internally illuminated white and purple letters mounted to the building, so kind of their branding. If you're familiar with Roxbury, that's their look. And then the next wall sign would be the north, and this is facing the Harmons. And this sign's a little bit... This sign is the same size. This sign is 54 square feet as well. They could be allowed to have a little bit more signage based on the wall square footage here, up to 126 feet, but they're showing 54 square feet, same type of sign, internally illuminated white and purple. The light is white, but the lettering is white and purple. And then a bigger sign on the rear elevation or the east elevation. The west elevation, wall sign facing Rachel. This one's 60 square feet. They'd be allowed also to have 79 square feet on this wall sign. This does include internal illumination, but it's white only. There's no purple proposed on this particular sign. It just says Roxbury Juice Company. The signs do meet Chapter 1744 of our city code. They're before you tonight because they are in a PDC zone. We don't have any issues or items of concern with the application. So city staff would recommend that the Planning Commission approve the proposed wall signs for Roxbury Juice Company. located at 3542 Rachel Drive, Suite 101, subject to the 4 conditions. So we have a condition for each sign. The east sign, I think I wrote that wrong. The west sign in condition number 2, I apologize. That's meant to say west building elevation. Condition number 3 is the north building elevation or wall elevation sign, and 4, that a building permit is required. So as you know, it's kind of exciting, the users we have here. We have Great Clips, we have Beans and Brews, we have Club Pilates, and now we have Roxbury Juice coming into that building. So this is the last one. And the other 3 have all been approved previously. Thanks. I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Blake.
Thank you, Jim. Any questions from the commission on this?
We have someone that joined us. I just saw them. So let's see, just in case. So we just let someone in. Is that you, Ethan? We've been talking about Roxbury signs. Are you with us now?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Okay, Ethan, I've covered it and now it's turned back over to the planning commission. So we'll see if they have any questions for you. I just wanted to recognize that you're here. Thank you.
Okay. So do I just wait to hear from them?
Correct. Just go ahead and wait.
You got it.
I don't think I have any questions.
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I think
I'm just curious why the brand is different. 2 of them are relatively similar to what Roxbury's brand is, and then the back sign is, I'm just curious.
I'm curious too. He's starting to do this on some of his locations. I've already done 3 of them, and I'm like, why are we changing our brand and doing it halfway? I don't even know.
Okay.
I tried, but you know.
And then that number 2, that east-west was the only thing I saw.
Yeah. Condition 1 is east, condition 2 is west instead of the east I had there. So thank you.
no, I think it looks good too. So
Here's a bigger drawing. It's a good looking sign. So
it's interesting to me that they all kind of turned out white for the most part of all the 4 different tenants. They're all white.
Right. Yeah, on that building.
So cohesion, I guess. Trend, I guess, for signs, but
got a little purple on this one. So
yeah. I'll look for a motion for this. Remember, this is an approval, not a recommendation for this item.
So I'll move that we approve the Roxbury Juice signs located at 3542 Pioneer Parkway with the conditions that have been stated by staff and just a tiny modification on recommendation number 2. That would be just corrected to say the west building elevation.
And then question on the motion, the address we actually have for the building is off of Rachel Drive because it backs on Rachel.
Okay,
So
did I?
Pioneer Parkway,
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
which I originally thought that was the address.
Oh, okay, I
Well, but
apologize.
We've changed their address.
You caught me. It was
So
just-
thank you.
I was just reading off the.
I thought the same thing.
business Here.
So
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we got a motion from Commissioner Call, a second from Commissioner Whitehead. All in favor? Aye. Motion passes unanimously. We'll move on to item number 5A2. The Steve's Automotive wall signs located at, oh, sorry, thanks. Yep, you're welcome.
thanks for being here.
Yep.
Steve's Automotive wall signs located at 2291 Santa Clara Drive. Bradley Saleh with Rainbow Signs applicant.
Thanks. Bradley, are you here? We just want to make sure you can hear us.
Yes, I'm here. Can you guys hear me all right?
We can. So I'll go ahead and present and we'll see if they have some questions for you. Thank you. So this is a wall sign proposal as well. This is zone PDC, the strip retail center here. The Town Square Shopping Center is in the planned development commercial zone. So it's also subject to chapter 1744. indicating that wall signs require planning commission approval. You may recall if you've been there or utilized the service previously, this space was used for Doug's Master Auto Care for a number of years. Doug has recently left and Steve is taking over. So that's why they're here proposing wall signs this evening. They're proposing a total of 2 wall signs. The 10% allowed would allow of that wall, the wall facing Pioneer Parkway, not Pioneer Parkway, Santa Clara Drive, or down in the valley, would allow for up to 264 square feet of signage along the front elevation or north side of this building or the space. Again, 2 walls are being proposed, 2 wall signs. The first is 152 square feet. As you can see, it includes tire and auto repair. The sign includes non-illuminated 1.5-inch white form plastic letters. And then the second sign is a 59 square foot sign. It includes Steve Automotive. This sign also includes the 1.5-inch white form plastic letters. So that's the thickness of the letter itself. As you can see, the letters are 2.5 feet tall, and then the sign is approximately 60 feet wide. And then the other sign, you see the letters that say Steve's and then Automotive, just over 3.5 feet by 16 feet wide. The signs are non-illuminated, so there's no lighting here. The proposed signs do meet the requirements for wall signs of Chapter 17.44 of City Code. We don't have concerns with the item. Staff is recommending that the Planning Commission approve the proposed wall signs for Steve Automotive located at 2291 Santa Clara Drive, subject to the 3 conditions. And the third being that a building permit must be obtained prior to placement of the wall signs on the building. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jim. Any questions for the applicant from the commission?
Nope.
And for me.
I don't have any. I guess it seems pretty straightforward, just updating the business on this one, so I'll look for a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve Steve's Automotive wall sign located at the address 2291 Santa Clara Drive with, or subject to the 3 conditions recommended by staff.
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Whitehead and a second by Commissioner Harris. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you guys.
Thanks for being here, Bradley.
Yep, no problem. Have a good one, you guys.
All right, the next item of business, we have 2 discussion items this evening. The first one is a proposed building height definition. Cody Mitchell, our building official, has been working on this item for a bit of time. And I have the information here, and I'm just going to turn the time over to Cody on this particular item.
More comfortable over there, but
I'll grab it though. Good evening. Yes, as Jim mentioned, this is the height of building definition. That's how it's termed currently in the ordinance. But this agenda item is brought before you this evening to review the definition as per Santa Clara City Ordinance 17.08.010, as well as additional ordinances that pertain to the maximum height of primary structures. I'd like to review the current ordinances, and then review 3 with an added 4th scenario and discuss proposed alternate language to the term building height. So first,
You want to go here?
yeah, let's start right there. This is the current language for building height. It reads height of building, the vertical distance from the grade to the highest point of the coping of a flat roof, or to the deck line of a mansard roof, or to the height of the highest peak of a pitched or hipped roof. The grade shall be the elevation of the sidewalk at the center point of the sidewalk in front of the dwelling, or if no sidewalk exists, by the crown of the road. So we felt the language is a little outdated and vague in some instances when we're trying to apply it out in the field. The second ordinance, I just grabbed the three, there's three different places in the ordinance that addresses primary building height. So the second one addresses subterranean homes, which we don't see a lot of anymore. So I imagine we'll keep that language in there just so we have something if anything ever comes along. And then the third is the historic district, and it allows 25 feet or an average of the one or two blocks. Let's see, accessory building shall not, it's later in the paragraph starting with accessory buildings, shall not exceed 2 stories in height up to 25 feet in height unless a taller building is approved by city council after considering recommendations from the Heritage Commission and the Planning Commission. But it would be based on we're trying to match the average height in the historic district, so you don't have something that's a little outlandish as compared to the other existing structures. So that's the existing language. Now to the proposed language. And this went before city council in a work meeting on May 17th. And they were receptive of this language with the addition of the language that's towards the bottom of the page currently in the red, and I'll get to that. So the proposed language, building height, the vertical distance measured from the average natural grade of a building pad or approved finished grade of a building lot, whichever is applicable, to the highest point of the building or structure, including architectural features, chimneys, and rooftop mounted equipment. With an exception, where there is a difference in finished grade on a lot or a parcel, the building's height shall, it says may, but I need to correct that to shall, be measured from the average grade. Height is measured between the upper grade and the lower grade with the following restrictions. The maximum variation allowed between the upper grade and lower grade is 10 feet. And the second exception would be the highest point on the building or structure as defined in this section shall not exceed a maximum allowed height as measured from the average grade. So to cover those, there's three, and I'll come back to the changes that the city council advised. But let's start with the first one. There's a detail described. If you'll just scroll down a little bit, Jim. Yeah, to the drawing. This one is the exception to the rule, and it's basically addressing a walkout basement lot. You take the upper grade and the lower grade and find the average grade, and the upper grade and lower grade cannot be or exceed a 10 feet in differential. So it gives you essentially 5 feet to the overall height of the building measured from the average grade. So from the average grade, you can go up 35 feet to the highest point of the structure. So that's the exception for that would pertain to the walkout basement. On the next one, this is put in for the natural grade, the line that addresses the natural grade. If someone were to take a legal lot of record without doing any subdivision improvements, we would have to establish a pad elevation. So this would just take the average native grade, and you'd be able to prepare a building pad. And from that pad, you would measure 35 feet. And the third scenario, oh, I'm sorry. This one is the native grade, so it has the rolling grade. Yes, and then this one would be, I mean, they're much the same. This is in an established subdivision where the pads, the elevations are engineered and established through the subdivision process. So you would take
We approve elevations at preliminary plat.
we haven't been, but we encouraged it just recently in the Solis subdivision, mainly for the floodplain elevation certificates. So we wanted those established at that time. And I don't think it's a bad idea anyway, because you get people that want to artificially adjust their grade, which we address. The council asked for some more language on that, which I'll cover in just a second. Any questions on the three of those definitions?
So on the average grade, let's say somebody wasn't really smart and built their house down in a hole, so everything kind of drained into it. Not that that would ever happen. How would that average grade work? 'Cause you could ultimately build up.
Well,
Correct. So
yeah.
you could ultimately build that roof line up to 38, because if you're measuring from the average grade, the house starts at 3 feet below where that average grade is, you're technically going, am I understanding how that would work?
Well, yes, but well, your average grade would typically be a positive grade unless you're into the hills or something that's real dramatic. This kind of addresses the valley lots where you'd have a rolling grade. Instead of building up a mound of 10 feet and saying we're going to choose the highest grade and build our pad at this elevation. The ordinance is saying, no, you need to take the average grade of your 5 acres. I mean, it's going to be a very rare case. It's going to be somebody that has maybe a larger parcel, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 acres, something like that, and they want to build a single home. So they would take the average grade from that lot or an area around where they want to build their pad. I don't think we would consider the intent of the ordinance not to take 5 acres and say, well, we've got 100 feet of difference. We can have a 50-foot pad. It would be the area that they want to construct their home within reason, and then they would build their pad on that average native grade.
So I would be looking like in reference to some of the homes that'll be built in Black Desert, you obviously have some giant mounds of lava. You could be building down underneath those mounds of lava, whereas the average grade of your lot could be 3 or 4 feet higher than where your pad is. So could you go up 3 or 4 feet higher than the 35 feet?
No, this section does not pertain to Black Desert because Black Desert is going to be a subdivision. And the grades will be set for the flow of the street as per the engineer. The average grade and the native grade, that line is only to address single parcels that do not go through the subdivision process, that we need to establish a grade.
And they're limiting themselves to a 28-foot height max. Building height limit
Up there,
28 feet.
yeah, up there.
Over
But
there,
this-
which is
is it-
7 feet less than.
This is to this would also establish like how someone would do that 28 feet, right? Because we're defining building height and how you measure that with the.
Correct. And it's a good question. Like, I mean, we could talk a little bit longer about Black Desert in and of itself, because Black Desert wants to do more. I mean, what we're understanding from the meetings we've sat in with them, they want to do more of a can or an entrada style building pad where they do recess, they capitalize on the views and minimal disturbance of the native terrain. So we are going to have some that are recessed, but they're not going for maximum height either. I mean, we won't see anything that Black Desert is planning on in the single family nature at 35 feet. I can't see them doing anything like that from the conversations we've had.
Walkout basement, the lower level might be further down.
Yes, but they would only, to take the measurement, you would only use 10 feet. It essentially gives you 40 feet, 40 feet in height from the lower level up.
Here's the question I have. I think like Black Desert, somewhere you probably wouldn't have to worry about this, but I would think more so in that new subdivision that Fry's built on Vineyard. So if you got down there and you have the Claude Drive, which is here, and you have Vineyard, which is like way up here, would your upper grade be Vineyard and your lower grade be Claude Drive?
No, the upper and lower grade is, I mean, now you're back into a subdivision where the pads are already
So that subdivision, we had the pads established and they're 35 feet from whatever the pad
from
is.
pad. We would measure 35 feet from the established elevation of the pad.
Okay, this is one of my questions is why do we do the graded pad and why we do not just go off of whatever finished floor is and they're 35 feet from?
Well, I would love to go off finished floor because that's all of the information I receive. And I mean, typically with the slab on grade, you're within 4 to 6 inches between pad and finished floor elevation. The point where that becomes challenging is on a basement. How far, if they're trying to avoid soils, they may sometimes hold that out of the ground 4 feet. Or if they're putting the home on piles, it could be 18 inches to 36 inches out of the ground. So finished floor changes depending on what type of construction you're
Right,
using to
so, like,
construct the
If
home.
they're doing grade beams or something, they could be up a little bit higher for their finished floor.
Right, that's exactly where I wanted to go. I wanted to go off finished floor, but I just don't see you'd have to establish every type of construction and give them limitations on how high their finished floor could be, which we have a lot of movement, even in a basement lot, depending on the separation from the troubled soils. That could vary. Some people may want their basement all the way, with a one step up in from the main entry, but with troubled soils, not wanting to over X, they may choose to have it up 3 or 4 feet. So, yeah, so I based everything off of, reluctantly off of pad elevation. So, I'm sorry, any other questions on what we've talked about so far? So the council, they ask for a little bit more language to address a scenario such as the hills, where you have where your top back of curb and sidewalk may be much lower than the house pad. How are we going to address that? So between Jim and I, we put together the language that's in the red. So in the event a building pad is substantially higher than the street grade, greater than 3 feet measured from top back of curb, the approved building pad shall be established by the natural topography and approved by the Hillside Review Board prior to the building permit issuance. In no case shall a building pad be artificially elevated to accomplish a favorable view shed. But we felt like that would cover the concerns that the council had when we presented this in their work meeting, but I'm open to further discussion.
So the only thing I saw with this is if you're on a steep hill, where are they measuring that natural? Because that natural is going to, it could be 5 feet on the front and 10 feet on the back. Where is the natural?
Yeah, and this language kicks it back to the Hillside Review Committee. They would have to present elevations of the structure, probably on all sides. And it would be up to them to pass on the recommendation.
Okay, so they're the ones that would determine that.
Yes. And again, it's when you get in we have some hillsides left to develop, but when you get in these scenarios, it's just to prevent people from kind of playing king of the hill and obstructing other people's views. And I think that's the way the Hillside Committee would look at that. So
one of the lots which would come under this is Sycamores 2 that we brought you recently, just a meeting or two ago, where they did 4 lots, but the lot on the other side of the street, the big lot, that was over an acre, it's a hillside.
Yeah.
Hillside, so they have to go to Hillside Review Board before they can get a permit.
Is that the one right here?
It's by the bridge.
It's on the south
Yeah.
side of
Okay.
the,
Yeah,
we had the 3 on the north side.
yes.
And one on the, one on
One
the,
in the south, but going back to phase 1B, I identified 2 others from the Hillside Review back in 15 that they said need to come back to Hillside Review. So there's another plat where there's 2 lots that have to come to Hillside Review Board prior to permit issuance, and then that 1 lot in phase 2. So we've got 3 out there we know of right now, then Sycamores that have to do Hillside Review Board.
so does that process happen before they even turn soils, before they even get a pad ready? It goes to Hillside, or is that they can start flattening a pad and then go to Hillside and say, are we all right?
They're supposed to go to Hillside. The
Yeah.
problem is some work has occurred on some of those sites in the past without approvals, but Logan, go ahead.
I was like, typically before you do any grading, has to get it approved.
You go to Hillside to discuss that, but we have some areas that are more native and some that have been disturbed over the years. But they're still Hillside.
I just have a question about the last sentence.
sure.
Is that, I don't know. So some of the reasons for elevating a pad more than 3 feet might not necessarily be just to get a favorable view shed. It might be to accomplish better grading, less damaging to the hillside on the backside of the house or whatever. Because I think of like places like Stonecliff and stuff like that where they're quite a bit higher because they're trying to come down this slope and that sort of thing. They're not necessarily looking for favorable views, they're just trying to actually make the grading work in there. But I guess that would be So am I saying, is that we're gonna hold them if they're just doing it for that, or if there's other reasons behind it? Other than just view shed, would it be allowed?
Well, in the case of, like you mentioned, Stone Cliffs, first of all, it would be kicked automatically to the hillside. Every home would go to hillside for height approval. So the last line is it's just some broad language saying, hey, in no case can you artificially elevate your pad to accomplish a greater view or.
Just,
I
Yeah.
think a lot of that you see on a case by case, don't you? I mean, if it's,
Yeah, it's very tough to write an ordinance that's going to cover every instance that we're going to face. The most typical is the pre-engineered pad ready subdivisions. And then the next one after that, in my opinion, would be the walkout basements. Again, they're in the subdivisions typically. And then on a rare case, we would get the undeveloped parcel. Someone just owns a legal lot of record and they want to put a home on it. And maybe in the future, the hillside may bump up on that list, but right now we don't have a lot of hillside development. But we wanted some language in there to address it, just so. Yeah, because the others, you could go and put a subdivision together on or neighboring the hills. And you put 35 feet on a lot that's already elevated, has a driveway that may increase in elevation 10 to 15 feet. And then you put another 35 feet on it and yeah, it starts to look a little obtrusive.
Yeah. One question I have, I know we probably have, I just want to make sure we have flexibility for multiple scenarios. And I assume the hillside review board will allow stuff, and there's provisions to allow people to go higher than 35 feet as established with this.
To go higher than
Yeah.
35
Is
feet?
there like conditional uses where people could go higher than 35
No.
in our code? So
35's pretty standard for residential. I've seen other places that
I
limit
know
to
I'm,
30,
let me
so.
tell you some experiences I've seen where it makes sense to go higher. So my cousin was building a house. He's a builder. He was building a house up in Shadow Mountain. And based on definitions like this, he was actually being sensitive to the hillside and was building a tiered house that had multiple levels in it. And because his grade was established at his garage, and then the house went up and matched the hillside, it exceeded the 35 feet because of the way it was massed into the hill. And he had to get a conditional use permit for that. And they allowed it because he was being sensitive to the hillside, not doing excessive grading and scarring and that sort of stuff. And I just want to know, because you have this place over here in the South Hills, I think you could probably get some of that where somebody wanted to be sensitive. And it would need to be some flexible thing that people would bring in.
So you're talking about a provision that would have to be a rewrite of the hillside ordinance. And I don't have that in front of me to tell you what that exactly says. I'm sure there's some flexibility, as we have a number of engineers that are on the hillside review board, and some have been there on it for many years, but we'd have to take a look at it. I think in most cases, this is going to do, but we may have a scenario where we have to look outside the box a little bit and may have to approach that at that time. But like Cody said, it's hard to write something to address every scenario. I don't want to do conditional uses for additional height. And we'll talk about that on the next item in a few minutes. But I think it's something we need to look at it, at a later date. I don't think that's part of this, what we're looking at tonight.
Yeah, I mean, you could write it, you'd have to be very specific. Otherwise, if you write that there's an exception to the height, then an exception to a rule kind of voids the rule. And that's exactly where we're going with the next topic. And we briefly discussed it through some approvals in the last meeting I attended. I missed the one prior, but
We had the additional height for the Kelly Gates application off of Quail.
right.
And that was under conditional use, and we prefer not to have that in the case of accessory structures and garages or ADUs, any type of conditional use provision for additional height. We'll talk about some things that I've reviewed and researched and looked at that I think would be more applicable. Because a conditional use is a permitted use with conditions. That's the difficulty. And if it meets the ordinance, we have to grant it. Even if we don't think it's a good thing, we have to grant it. So I think what you're talking about, Logan, Commissioner Blake, we have to be more specific and take a look at our hillside ordinance and see what it says in there. I'm not familiar of a conditional use provision in the hillside ordinance. So that's
How
where
would- how would
we
it-
address it.
How
So
would an ADU be affected by this if we put a attached unit in the back? Does that start from the original or where?
well, if it's attached to the existing home, it can meet the same requirement. That's an IADU.
Uh-huh.
If it's attached to the home, it's the same thing. But if it's detached, a detached ADU is limited to a maximum height of 20 feet.
Also, that's okay.
Detached. And most people are doing a guest house, a single level. I mean, they could have a loft or something, but if it's attached to the home as an IADU, that's one set of circumstances, but detached is another. And we have a lot of large homes that are large ramblers, such as what we're going to see in Black Desert. And, you know, we talked about Canta and Entrada, where it's more lower level and kind of sprawling on the lot, but they're big lots, so there's still open space too. We certainly don't want ADUs that are way taller than the home in front.
Unless they're building up the backside of a hill that they
Right.
could be, that would be
Right.
the only.
But it's an accessory use. It's not the primary use of property, which is the home. So,
This is mostly just to define how you measure height. That's what we're looking at, just to clarify how we measure it everywhere.
Correct.
So I'm kind of beating a dead horse, but item number 1, the maximum variation allowed between upper and lower grade is 10 feet. But it isn't, I mean, that is not what's allowed. That's how you're measuring it. right?
Correct. Yeah, if it's 12 feet, we're only going to use 10.
So should there be a measure? I mean, I don't know. To me, it reads like you cannot have a walkout basement that is greater than 10 feet from the,
No, if you do, then if you go lower than that, then you're only given the 5 feet. It gives you a 5 feet. That's all it gives you.
I'm just saying the way it reads, it might, but
So you're
So
saying like if you do a walkout basement that's 12 feet, technically you can go from that, your backside that could technically be higher than 35, or I guess it's not, yeah, right?
or someone's going to read that and say, well, you're telling me I can only have a 10-foot walkout basement, the way it's written.
I understand what you're
exactly.
saying. My interpretation is if you have a 12 foot walkout basement, you get 40 feet from that lower grade. You get 40 feet from the lower, wherever you put it. If it's 10 feet, 12 feet, 15 feet, you get 40 feet from the lower grade to the peak, the highest point of the roof. Because that's what the 10 feet, the difference in grade gives you is 5 feet to the 35.
So just to clarify, you're saying even if there's a 15 or 20-foot grade difference, they get 5 feet and they can build
Well,
up.
I don't know why you ever have 20
Well,
feet of grade difference. The max would be,
silly example.
I think probably 13 would be probably the max. So from the lower grade, whatever it is, that exception 1 gives you 5 more feet. So it gives you 40 feet from wherever your lowest grade is. So if you have to soften the pitch to accomplish whatever you're doing, then that may be what they look at. 35 feet is a lot. It's a lot of house.
40 feet's a lot. When you get it up, when you.
Yeah.
40, you have 10 of it.
it's pretty common with the daylight, so they're getting the height. It works.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's where I'm a little confused by this. Because now you're saying the 35 feet is measured from the lower grade.
No.
No,
it's
from
from
the-
from the
Average grade.
So technically on the backside of the walkout, you could be taller than 35 feet from that lower grade. That's what so they could do, so, right? So
So from grade
Yeah,
back there
but
to the
like-
top, I think it's 40 feet, Cody, but the average is 35, right? So where you enter the
So
lowest
in
grade.
the 12-foot scenario, you're 5 feet below the upper grade. And they go down 2 more feet. Now they're 42 feet on the backside. technically,
No, because the most they'd ever give is 5 feet because 10 feet is
but that's measured from the average. So then, okay, so then you're 40, sorry, so now you're 41 feet or something.
where does the 1 foot come?
Mm-mm.
So if you have a 12-foot step, you're going, so your average is only 5 feet. And if they do go more than 10,
But they can because if they are 12, the max they get credit for is 10.
but where is that? So the
Right,
average,
isn't that the way I'm,
from the average.
isn't that what I'm?
Well, I think this drawing to me illustrates it. To me, it seems pretty clear, actually,
Yeah.
that
I think it's clear.
drawing.
Item number 1 makes me feel like you're telling people they can't have a lower grade more than 10 feet in the way it's written.
And the maximum variation, just those 3 words or those 2 words, I think if you read that, that makes sense that they're just saying that that's the max that you can measure. It's not saying the max.
Variation
I
allowed.
that seems to be, for me, that seems clear.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I still
and-
I don't understand that extra foot that you're,
So your average is the distance between upper and lower grade.
Yep.
And that's gonna move depending on if you go more than 10 feet.
well, it shouldn't because isn't upper grade always measured from the bottom of
Okay,
the
so
slab,
if
right?
You're always saying the average, you're always saying that you can measure now. You can go 35 feet from 5 feet below the upper grade, but you're starting at 2 feet below the lower grade. Then you're gonna have 42 feet on the backside of the
Oh,
house.
from the, okay, that would make sense. Yeah, I see what you're saying, but it's still 40 feet total from the, if you're using the upper grade.
And if you're neighboring a slab on grade lot, you're actually reduced to 30 feet maximum height where they could be at 35.
Yeah, I'm just
So,
thinking about like these houses in the sycamores that everybody can see from the road and they have those big walkout basements. What you see, because it's facing the river, you're gonna be able to see a 40-foot tall house from that side,
Well, even here
From
on
the neighbor
Red
behind them
Mountain
down
Road,
the hill is gonna.
those that are facing your place over there, they get those, from the street, they look like they're 18 feet.
Yeah, so
high,
if you
but
have like the
on the
walkouts
backside,
with the
they're
house
huge.
below them, they are potentially gonna have a 40-foot tall house on top of them, but
What it is.
what it is.
Yeah, there's in those scenarios, if you drive into Snow Canyon Estates, it doesn't matter if you're 20 feet or 40 feet, you lose that element of privacy.
Yeah.
Just because of the grade difference.
Yeah, seems clear to me. I think it looks good.
Well, I'm happy to entertain. If you have some language you'd like to propose, I'm happy to take that to city council or talk it over with you.
I like it.
So the next step would be it coming back to you for a public hearing because it's a code amendment. And so we could do that in 2 weeks, that it come back to you and then your recommendation would send it to the council a couple weeks later. So this one.
Where are you gonna post?
What's that?
No.
No, we don't post code amendments.
Thank you.
So we don't have to motion or anything.
No, this is just a discussion item. In 2 weeks, you will.
We may need to bring a whiteboard in here, Cody, so when people ask you questions and try to confuse you, you can just say, hey, wait a second. I got straight A's in math. Don't try to mess with me.
Oh, that's better than me. I did my best to get Bs. So
Oh, I'm-
it's hard.
I'm saying Cody got straight A's. I'm not saying I
Yeah.
got straight A's.
Okay. I said you bested me. All right, Chair, would you like me to go to the next item?
Yes, yeah, sorry, moving on to item 6B to.
I don't have anything to share with you this evening. This is just a first discussion, but this is something that we've been discussing at a city staff level and internally for a while. As you know, last month, or I don't know if it was 4 weeks ago or 6 weeks ago, we had an interesting one that came before us asking for additional height to an existing situation, good size accessory structure This one also included an ADU, even though there was some mistakes made previously by a previous employee as to the setback. They were not expanding the ADU because they already had an ADU. They were looking to expand just the storage or garage space, and the ordinance allowed them to do so in the conditional use that we had talked about. They met the requirements of the conditional use. So I want to just talk about a few things. The first one is accessory structure height, and I just want to talk about that for a minute. So if we go to our RA zone, as well as our R110 zone and our R110 mixed lot size zone, they all say the same thing for height. It says no building shall be erected to a height greater than 35 feet, so that's the home, and no accessory building shall be erected to a height greater than 20 feet without a conditional use permit approved by the Planning Commission. So the conditional use permit, to my knowledge, all the garages or detached structures that have come to the Planning Commission, I'm not aware of any that have been denied, because, 9 times out of 10, or maybe even more, they can go through the requirements and meet the conditional use requirements in the ordinance itself. And if they're not willing to meet those requirements, or let's say the Planning Commission determines that they will grant the conditional use based on this criteria, and the applicant says, that's great, thank you for your time, but I can't do that. You see what I mean? I mean, we still have to approve the conditional use, but the applicant decides not to proceed or move forward because they cannot meet the conditional use requirements. So I think what we're saying here is if I look at an RA zone, and I'm just going to throw this out there, it's a half acre zone, right? Half acre or larger. Vineyards comes in mind. Vineyards 11 down the street here. Others in the valley where we have a lot of large lots. Why not allow a height of 25 feet for this zone? That's just, I'm going to throw that out there just for kicks and giggles. So maybe we allow 25 feet in that zone. They can have a maximum of 25 feet in that zone. Now, when we wrote the R16 zone, because it's a smaller lot, we put a cap at 25 feet, and I did not include this conditional use language for the R16 zone that we adopted last year, because we also said the building height in a R16 zone is limited to 30 feet for the home. And then we're talking about 20-foot max on a detached garage or accessory structure. Now, I'm looking at the R110 zone and the mixed lot zone, and I'm thinking about the height in those zones. And so I'm fine with keeping it at 20 feet, allowing a height of 20 feet like the ordinance currently reads. But what I'm saying is, so allow a height of 20 feet with a maximum of 25 if additional setbacks are given, and that could be to the rear and side yard both. So right now, we're talking about accessory structures and garages, not ADUs. We're talking about the guy that wants to build the 1,000 square foot garage with the RV and boat door. So it's 3 cars. We've seen a lot of them, probably in that 750 to 1,000 square foot range for toys and other things. So basically, for example, each additional 2 feet of setback allows for 1 additional foot of height to a maximum height of 25 feet. So basically that would put an applicant, instead of 5 foot from a rear or side property line, they'd have to be at 15 feet to get to that 25 feet from that rear or side property line, that corner V. And that provides relief to the adjacent neighbor. They're not putting that height right on the property line. So the one we discussed last month, a little bit different, because we had people and residents that live in the area, and as well as members of the Heritage, saying, I'm okay with it because it backs onto duplexes, my vacant field. I'd like to do something similar at some point in time. But I've worked in areas such as Sandy City where we went back and forth on these detached accessory buildings and where they could be placed on the lot. And so people build big homes on R110 and R18 lots. And then they come back later and decide they want this accessory structure in the back, but they put it in the very back corner where it impacts the neighbor the most and not themselves. A lot of times it's 30, 40 feet from their house, but it's 5 feet from a property line, and maybe 20 feet or 15 feet if it's only a 10-foot rear yard setback to that home from them. So the impact is on them. So my idea is more structured, and I've seen this used in a number of places where if you want more than 20 feet in height, you have to provide additional setback to provide relief to the adjacent resident. And so, and then it tops at 25 feet. You know, that allowance is given for up to 5 additional feet per 2 feet, you know, 2 to 1 type of thing. And no conditional use. You know, it's not a conditional use. It's done administratively with staff. If we need to, we'll have them come to TRC, talk to us and review the plans, but the requirements are right there set in stone. We don't put it on the planning commission as a conditional use and go through that process. So that is dealing with the accessory structure height. The other thing is, and I just have notes, you know, I've been working on this. Here's my chicken scratch trying to do math. If you look at the drawings here. So I look, like I said, in the R16, the height is limited to 20 feet. Okay, we've got that already. In the R110, it's at 20 feet. It's at 20 feet currently, but with the CUP, you could do up to the 25, and we're talking about moving that away. But what I'm getting at to now is the sizes of accessory structures and lot coverage. I'm sorry, item number 2. And so when we read the ordinance right now, this is what it says. No accessory building nor group of accessory buildings in a residential district shall cover more than 25% of the lot area. Okay. So 25% of the lot area could be pretty big when we're looking at the entire lot. So in the case of Kelly Gates, it was almost half an acre. So that gave him a large footprint, a lot of area that he could expand. And what I'm thinking, and this is, you know, I've seen this and I've done this. Other places I've worked require this. The 25% or whatever that percentage is that we allow is measured from the rear plane of the home to the rear property line. So it's that rectangular box. It could be an irregular shaped lot too, but it's the rear plane of the home. And it can go to the side yard, to the side yard, to the rear yard. So in the case of a larger lot, let's say we have an RA lot and it's over a half acre in size and they keep 10,000 square feet, and they may not have that much. I'm just doing nice round numbers. An RA lot could allow for a 2,500 square foot accessory structure because they've got a big lot and a big property. That's pretty large. An R110 lot, if we divided that in half and just went with 5,000 square feet, which is probably best case scenario, they could have 1,250 square feet. That's a pretty big accessory structure based on the fact that homes are most homes are around a couple thousand square feet. Some are less, some are bigger, just throwing that number out there. And then the mixed lot size would be similar, you know, for the 10,000 square foot lot. But if we had a smaller mixed lot size, they may only get 750 square feet. If they had an R18 lot and an R19 lot, maybe 750 to 900 square feet. In the case of an R16, they're going to be closer to that 500 or 600 square foot scenario, which is still an oversized 2-car garage. You know, a minimum 20 by 20, which I had before moving here in a newer home we built. The garage was a mistake, but we were limited in our lot size. But the 20 by 20 is the very minimum, right? That you see with a 16-foot door. Most people want a 24 by 20 or something a little bit bigger, but it allows these variations. So I would say in R16, they could get like a 500 square foot accessory structure. The R110 mixed lot size, maybe they're 750 to 1,000. The R110, maybe they're 1,000 to 1,500. And then an RA, especially if they have an acre or a large lot here in the valley, they could do bigger. You know, they might do an accessory structure the size of a home, but their primary residence might be 5,000 or 6,000 square feet. The other thing is that I have concerns with is allowing an accessory structure to be taller than the primary residence itself. So do we want to add something there? Because if someone has a large 1-story home, and let's say that home's 24 or 25 feet tall because of the roof pitch, and they come in, or let's say it's 22. They come in, they want a 25-foot accessory structure that is 2,000 square feet in size. Do we want to allow them to have an accessory structure that's taller than the primary structure on the home, on the lot? That's just another question that I have.
Well, that could be a barn, like if on some of
could
these,
be.
on some of these bigger units.
And maybe that's not a concern in the RA zone, but in the R110, in the mixed lot size, because I can tell you in Solus, the first thing they're doing are the 7,000 and 8,000 square foot lots, the smaller lots. That zone limits it to 40% 10,000 square foot lots, and then 20% for 9,000, 8,000, and 7,000. So you get 60% mixed lot and you get 40% 10,000.
I think there has to be some variance for that RA zone, but I think the R16 and R110, what you're saying is exactly right, but that RA zone, so much could happen if you're, like,
Yeah.
I think Lonnie Gubler was living for some time in a barn. He was in the upper part of a huge barn in some of that property till he was building a home.
I wouldn't be surprised if we have others
Yeah, yeah, so
because
it's,
we have some large accessory
those are
structure.
large
Yeah.
ranch areas.
How do you feel about that rear plane of the home to the rear property line? I mean, even with an irregular lot shape, there's a lot of property there usually, and they're going to get most of the time what they want. But we have to have some limitations. I'm just really worried about the lots that are not RA, the 10,000 square foot to 6,000 square foot, and someone trying to do these huge structures because we have to calculate 25% of the entire lot. Why should we be doing that when the front is designated? They've got a home, they've got driveways, they got a front area, a backyard, side yards. Let's just calculate, a portion of.
I think that's a great idea. Because if not, like you say, then you get these crazy structures and it's just not, it doesn't look good.
Right.
And I also wanted to comment, I liked your comment about the structure height when you put in there that 1-to-2 relationship. That you stayed in there, that it's to provide relief
Yeah.
to the neighbors so that people kind of think about it instead of you guys just being a bunch of meanies and making up silly rules.
Yeah, and I have seen it. Where they put it right there on purpose because they know it's there and it's theirs, but they didn't want to look at it from their,
Yeah, I mean, who
home
wants to look at
and
another
their
garage?
room.
Let
They
every-
put it in the corner over there for someone else, the other neighbors to look at.
Sure.
And it's common because people will get close to their property lines.
Yeah.
It's common and they're allowed to do that. But if they want a higher building, they need to provide relief.
I think it's awesome. I think both
Yeah.
of those are great points.
So my question is, and the idea is, all these limitations are to allow someone to encroach into the setback. Is that why that's what my understanding was. You do all these restrictions because they're trying to build close to the line. There's no reason to do these restrictions if they're not building close to the line.
Well, so the first one, the height is like, even if they come build,
What I'm saying is, if you build an accessory structure that's that's in the normal setbacks of the.
Right. If you build a typical accessory structure that's 20 feet tall and you meet the requirements of to the 25% and you're,
No, what I'm saying is if you're 10 feet from the line and 8 feet from, or whatever, you're meeting the normal primary dwelling setbacks, you can go as 35 feet with it, right?
no,
Why not?
not for accessory.
Well, so my question is, how close you have to be to the building with these to be considered part of the building? Because you don't have to attach it if you're within certain distance.
Right now, the ordinance requires 10 feet of separation
It does.
between the
I
primary.
know. If you're not 10 feet and you're meeting the setbacks of the primary dwelling, then this thing can be pretty large. Right?
That's what I was telling you. If you cannot provide the 10 feet of separation, then you need to comply with the setbacks.
Right.
Once you comply with the setbacks, it can be attached. It can be 1 foot apart. It could be 3 feet. It could have a breezeway. Once you're inside your setbacks, you can build whatever you want. However, with an accessory structure, currently it's limited to 20 feet. Is that what I would like to see that increase? Because right now, if I build setback to setback, I could build 35 feet of primary residence. So if someone's complying with setbacks, should we maybe look at being a little bit more lenient on our accessory structures? I feel that we could. I don't know that we need to restrict them to 20, but to allow somebody to go 35 feet with an accessory structure, that seems a little absurd also.
why do you say that, Cody?
35 feet on an accessory structure?
Yeah.
Well, right now
We allow 20 right
We
now.
allow 20 feet and
I'm not aware. of
there's another
anybody
section that
allows-
limits to single story. So there's a lot of cleanup to do with accessory structure. And I don't know why you would need 35 feet of accessory. You're getting into ADUs, your ADUs.
So that's the allowance from a primary dwelling unit. This is the key. You have a primary use. These other things are all accessory to the primary.
Right.
So there's limitations on accessory uses to the primary use of property, which is a single family home.
Right, and I guess what I was kind of fishing for is that is kind of what you said earlier, I think, Cody, is that if you have the primary use of the property, one of you said that, I think, if that's 35, then if you do some sort of secondary use, it can't be bigger than the primary use,
Right.
right? The secondary use theoretically is smaller than the primary use.
And that's what we're getting at, because in the case of the last one, we have a historic home that's beautiful.
Right,
1,450 square feet. They did a 200 square foot addition, so 16 and change. And now they've got an accessory structure that's over 5,000 square feet because they've got the footprint, they've got an ADU, and then now they've got the storage space. So it seems to be out of scale.
right.
Now, historic's a little bit
Primary, right, at this,
right, which is primary and which is really secondary.
yeah, right,
So typically, an individual comes in, builds the home of their dreams or buys a home, comes back to us 3 to 5 years later because now they have the budget or monetary means to do that detached garage, she shed, shop, different term of what they want. So they're coming back to build that. We do have to have some regulations. The other one I wanted to touch on before we open this up all the way is just accessory structure location. Now, this is another one that's been discussed with us recently and in the past quite a bit. And so the code reads, and this is out of 1760-060, the modifying regulations. It says private garages and accessory buildings located to the rear and at least 10 feet away from the main dwelling. So that's the 10 feet that Cody's discussing, may be built 5 feet from the property line, provided that, and then it gets into some different things. Okay, so right now, our code specifically requires a 5-foot setback or an accessory structure from that rear property line or that side property line. Now, this is an accessory structure or detached garage. This is not an ADU with a dwelling unit, right? An ADU requires 10 feet, and that's what we were getting at before. Previously, you already had the ADU, but the ADU is living space, so you've got to have the 10. So how do you feel about that? Because I hear from many, we're good with 5 feet, let's keep it there. And I hear from others that want this changed to 3 feet. And maybe they'd be willing to fire rate the exterior walls if they're allowed to be closer. This is a big topic, and I don't know what the answer to this is. I'll let Cody speak to it a little bit. And he could also discuss kind of what city staff and administration feels, but right now it's 5 feet, and we've had some ask us for less, for 3 feet, perhaps, because other cities, especially in their historic districts or areas where they're redeveloping, may be allowing some of this right to a zero lot line. If the neighbor has so many feet, we haven't done that. But here in our setting, especially in the valley, but in the heights as well, we have bigger lots. We're not the downtown Salt Lake avenues or St. George. We're dealing with bigger lots. So what are we comfortable with? This is policy for the entire city. What are we comfortable with as a city? So those are the 3 main points. And then I just itemized, the R16, the mixed lot size, the R110, the RA. Another thing that I've recently found out is basically the PD zone or the PDR doesn't allow for accessory structures. Now, we probably have some, and that's another discussion for another day, but we're just focusing on the R1 zones right now. These are our 3 primary R1 zones. So let's talk about that one a little bit. Commissioner Blake, did you have some questions or comment on that one, that particular one?
Yeah, I'm in favor of reducing it based on just mechanics of having these. Because, well, for one thing, I'm not saying that because we've done it wrong in the past, we should keep doing it wrong, but when you're on these smaller R110 lots and you want to be able to actually access that fairly well, and you're on the side of your house, you only have 10 feet from your house to your privacy wall, whatever fence you have built over your lot line. If you have to be so far off there and with the way that the garage doors and the return on the garage doors, adding 2 more feet to it all the time, it becomes difficult for people to be able to access those on the side of their house. And so it'd be nice to have, let people that want to build them, be able to build them closer to the line so they can have better access to whatever vehicle or ways to get into that door.
Are you saying closer to a side yard property line or a rear yard property line?
Side yard, the rear
A side yard. Rear yard, you'd be fine with 5,
Yeah.
staying there to provide a little bit of relief to the neighbor. So it's a side yard thing.
And I think you'd also have to look at, for example, you're probably familiar with John Enth and his property. I think he'd mentioned he'd visited with you lately. He's my neighbor and he's looking at he wants a 3-foot variance. So he's building the same type of thing, and next to his property line, our neighbor has the exact same type of structure. So it's not like it would really be infringing on anybody's view, or so it's like a garage right next to a garage and then behind it, there's nothing there. So I could see that there would need could be an option for.
He did come by and talk to me. He's also discussed it with Cody,
Yeah.
our building official. So
And this
Yeah.
is similar to what you're saying, right? In
Yeah.
a situation like that, you could give him 3 feet because right next door to him, there's the exact same structure. Now, I think it has a 5-foot setback, but it's not really infringing on the neighbor or.
we'd have to change the code though to allow for the
Yeah.
3 feet. And so that's what we're talking about
Right.
because, and then if we allow the side yard to be 3 and the rear yard at 5, and I don't know that we will, because this is city policy. It's not just one situation. And yes, I know John, but we're looking at policy for the entire city. That would probably have to be fire rated because it's less than the 5 feet. And that's something that Cody could speak to, but, and I want him to be involved in this part of the conversation too. So let's give him a chance when do you have more dialogue?
I just
on
like
this
the idea
particular-
of giving the ability to be flexible on that,
Okay,
regardless.
Well,
of-
my thing too is if we add these restrictions of only occupying 25% of the yard and all that, you're going to limit the disturbance to the neighbors because you're only going to be doing it on one side of your lot. You're not going to have one on both sides encroaching 3 feet onto both neighbors. You know what I'm saying? You're only going to be able to put it on one side of your lot. You're not going to have them on both sides. And so
right.
whoever gets built first, whatever, they're still going to have the other side of their lot for their option. And most, at least modern subdivisions and most subdivisions, everybody's got their garages kind of on the same side as you go down the street. So all these,
Kind of on the side of their driveway.
Yeah,
Behind
like,
the
most of-
garage.
most of them would just be the same matching garages, that sort of thing. And that, so when you do have the 3 foot, but like I said, it's only gonna be one side because we're putting the you're not gonna have the Levitt situation where the whole back of it is because we're adding these other restrictions to it. And that's why I feel like you could do it if you're adding the restrictions that it's gonna limit how much of it you're gonna fill up. Like that guy doing 3 feet on one side, then covering the whole back of your yard, so he's encroaching on all of it. It's a bit excessive, but
Yeah, I really think there's a way to where we can come to an agreement because I'm concerned about limiting the size. I'm also concerned about location and building code requirements as well. So Cody, could we have you add onto this?
Yes, the building code is, as Jim's pointed out, and probably you all know that you can go less than 5. You can have a 0 lot so long as you're putting fire protection. The question I have is if, say, John goes and builds at 3 and his neighbor isn't at 3, the magic number with the fire code's 10 feet. So if the neighbor now wants to put one at 5 feet, is he forced to do a firewall now because John got the reduced setback to 3? And is that fair to somebody to incur that expense to do a firewall because John got 3 feet? So there's a lot of questions, and it's again writing the perfect ordinance that's going to address everyone, and it's very tough to do. I personally, I like the stepping method Jim, he touched on earlier. I like the lower buildings, and the building code kind of exempts non-permitted structures, the 200 feet or less, playhouses, little tool sheds that don't have the mass, that they don't require a building permit. They could be closer. It doesn't pertain. So they could be right up on property lines so long as they control their drainage and their projections. With that, you could write an ordinance that would allow 3, but you're limited in height, just stop the obtrusiveness of a higher detached structure. And as you move off property line, of course, you can gain some height. There's many ways to write it, and I don't know that one is any better than it's going to be better, but I don't know that you'll ever cover every different scenario. John, I scratched I don't understand John. John seems to have a lot more room than probably
It's
most anyone in the city.
Question with, because you're limited, it's making it the ease of access. And that's the whole reason to have them closer to the line is because your house is so far and you keep pushing it over and the door just makes it so you have to like weave around your house to get to your garage. And so that would be the reason to move it. You don't have to do the weaving thing. And that would be beneficial to everybody, not just John.
Yeah, I was curious
There's a lot
after
of
John
built
left.
in the heights that are all closer than this because everybody wants to be able to have a straight shot driving whatever they want back to their garage
Yeah.
inside their house.
Yeah, I understand that too. If I guess the caveat would be if they kept their height down, maybe they could accomplish a lesser setback. But to have a 20.
Even with the reduced height, you still have the fire code issue, right? That doesn't change
Yeah,
from
you
what you're
would.
saying.
That's what I'm saying. If we allow less the smaller buildings. So if you allowed something, I don't like that. It used to be 120 square feet and then the code, probably 3 code cycles ago, changed it to 200 square feet.
Without. a
200 seems
permit.
excessive to
Yeah.
me. But if you had a 120 square foot shop, 10 to 12 feet in height, without power, without plumbing, just simply a tool shed. I don't see that is exempt from the the firewall requirement. And I guess probably because of the limited fuel load.
I agree with you on that, Cody. I think that if we're gonna do anything less than that 5 feet, that which I'm not necessarily in favor of, but if we were to do that, whoever moves into that space, I think would have to do the wall or the fire prevention or whatever's involved in there. Because like you said, that doesn't make sense. And I go, build a building next to Curtis's property line. Then when he wants to build something, he has to do all this stuff because I'm already there.
Oh, whoever builds first absolutely has to, and whoever builds second absolutely has to.
If they build on the same property line.
Mhm.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Just because if
They
I
put the
build
same-
at 3 feet, then even Curtis, if he's at 5 feet, he's only 8 feet away. So now he'd have
Right.
to do it too.
Either Curtis moves over to 7 feet to accomplish 10 feet of separation, or,
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Or builds on a different property line.
Yeah,
right,
or 2 feet back.
Fire rates, but if something was allowed, let's say the 5 foot stays for the rear, a 3 foot side is allowed with fire rating. That cannot exceed 20 feet. They're maxed out because they're not giving, it's not the 2-to-1 to give a setback back in return for height.
Yeah.
So.
it's tough. I mean, I know that the neighboring cities, I don't think that one duplicates the other from what I've seen. I've built one in St. George and helped a friend in Washington. I worked for Ivans for a long period of time and now I'm here. And so all of them are different. And I don't know that any of
They
them
are.
are perfect.
They are different. You're right.
Yeah, I'm personally not very in favor. I mean, I probably shouldn't say this because we just went through a big, offset issue on a project we're working on, but I don't think that having them less than 5 feet I don't think that's a good thing personally. So,
And thank you for your comment. I was just going to say, if you all want to kind of give your comments, because this now has to go to council. So I haven't had a chance to discuss this with council. They've just directed us to do so. So we'll have to go back to them for more discussion before I can bring it back to you. So.
well, I'll just say, like I said, I like what you said about structure height and that 2-to-1 thing. I think that's a big deal. I think when you put it in there, that the wording so people know why this is happening, that seems really helpful. I agree with that. The size and lot coverage thing. What did you say? The rear
from the rear plane of the home to
Yeah, the
the
rear
property
plane.
line,
Yeah, I like-
side yards. So a lot of cases, it's a square or rectangle, but
Yeah.
within a regular shape lot, it can be different.
Yeah, and
So-
I'm, like I said, I don't think that doing less than 5 feet is a good thing because that means when we think about property owner rights, that my neighbor can do something, or I could do something over here next to Curtis's place and force Curtis now to have to do something on his own property that he wouldn't otherwise have had to do. So I create a hardship for Curtis. I don't think that's right.
So you like it staying at 5 feet?
I do.
Okay.
I don't know, I feel like it creates a hardship for everybody if you can't encroach into it. So, because then you're limiting everybody's ability to do something with their extra kind of wasted space behind on their lot lines and that.
Yeah, you almost wonder if there would have to be some approval from a neighbor if you were going to do something. I hate to just draw a line and say no ifs, ands, or buts on that 5 feet that you
Mhm.
can't. But there's got to be more to it that we would need to add something that would have the neighboring property saying, right, signing off on it or saying, yeah, it's all good. But then what happens 5 years down the road when he sells his property? They
Well,
don't
Then they bought it with knowing that that's
knowing that
there.
that's setback, yeah, I hate to just draw a hard line on that 5 foot because there's a million different circumstances that could arise.
Well,
Yeah, and that could be if, sometimes they may not be able to get it. Other times they can get it. And sometimes there may not be a neighbor, it may be undeveloped property, there's.
So would
just
that be
different
us,
scenarios.
how would that be? Would that come before us to
Mm-mm.
approve that or
No.
that's?
Just be in the.
No, it's gonna be administrative process with building and safety, planning and zoning and TRC if we need it. So just internal.
Another thing I think about it is I've lived in areas that have 0 lot lines and it can get kind of nutty sometimes. People build stuff. And so sometimes if you think about like Curtis and I decide that we're going to do these 3 foot or just have a 0 lot line, build our barns up against each other. We think it looks great. You're the neighbor across the street and you're thinking that makes our whole neighborhood look like a dump. And so I think that there's something to consider that, like up at, what's it called where you are, Snow Canyon Estates, if everybody kind of buys under that idea that, there's these 5 foot offsets and Curtis and I start mashing these buildings up against there, how do the neighbors perceive that? Does it matter what the neighbors think,
Jim, didn't you write something in the fence
Mhm.
ordinance that had some kind of agreement between? property-
Yes, chapter 1728, Cody and I worked on that. Both when we first started here, and I believe there is a provision about neighbor for additional height of fence,
Yep.
right? For the additional height to the fence and retaining wall. Is that what it was? Cody?
Yeah, when there's difference in grade,
Oh, that's right.
it, because the lower lot had, it's the obtrusive 9 foot wall potentially on a 3 foot difference, which is pretty standard when you have a stepping lot. So yeah, the lower lot has to agree. Otherwise they have to tier it.
I'm just suggesting that what Curtis recommended could be something.
We could look at that. We could look at something like that. I can throw that idea, basically my discussion next week with the council is going to be just like this. And I'll throw out some of your ideas and comments and see what I get from it. So, but they've wanted us to look at this, tighten it up a little bit because of some of the things we're getting. Yeah. So, but we can look at that the way we worded. I mean, it's a little bit different, but kind of the same as well. So that's a good thought. Any other comments from you guys, planning commissioners, Cody?
One thing I would add that if we do reduce the side setback, that we keep them the same, the side and rear. Just to save confusion and simplify enforcement. I don't see the difference in if we allowed a 3 on the side I don't see the difference in not allowing it on the rear.
Okay. So kind of that corner, if they choose to put it in there, would be the 3 and 3 if that's what they choose to do.
Yeah, because eventually, I mean,
Yeah.
at 5 feet, you may be able to store some, I don't know, an ATV or something. On what you can even use that for other than to clean up foliage that blows in and kind of collects there.
Well, it just helps with maintenance of the accessory structure, access to like the walls or whatever, if you gotta repaint or something, and then helps with the eaves and drainage, and that gives that little buffer or whatever. So that's what kind of the 3 feet I think is, just to make sure that they're gonna facilitate not draining on their neighbors and be able to have access to it or whatever.
Do we need to limit the eave to a foot? You know, what, do we need to get into that kind of detail if we're getting closer?
Yeah, the building code addresses that. You can,
Okay.
if you start getting into the firewall, the requirements for firewall and separation, it addresses the openings and the projections.
Yeah, I can tell you, I have a family member that lives in Lehigh and they have a neighbor building a pool house adjacent to them a foot from the property line, and they are not happy about it. Because Lehigh allowed that. The other neighbor built the structure 3 feet away, which seems reasonable, but the pool house had a foot. It's a bit much. Now it's opposite their living room and area, but still when they go in the backyard to the play area and trampoline, there it is, a foot from the property line. So.
The accessory stuff that where we allow reduced setbacks, it causes issues. The buildings obstruct views and maybe feel obtrusive. Where just speaking with Brock, and he was over at his brother's house, and the neighbor did a pool with a faux rock and a slide, and it abuts. So they're hanging out in the backyard or in the rear yard of Brock's brother's house, and here come the kids up the slide, and he says it towers over their 6-foot wall, and yeah, you lose that. So there's so many things with accessories that
Yeah.
it would be tough to catch them all.
I don't know, I just must have different feelings than everybody in this room, because I feel like you guys all look at it from the point that someone's imposing on you as opposed to you imposing stuff on them. Saying you can't do this because I'm not gonna like it. That doesn't seem fair to anybody. I mean, to everybody else. You don't like it, then I can't do it. I mean, so I think there has to be a little bit of fairness on both ends of this, that we're telling people they can't build something because somebody else might not like it. Well, lots of people don't like a lot of things that people do. But that's we live in a free society. A free society is not a fair society.
Right.
I guess it goes back to the squeaky wheel, the people we hear the most from.
Right.
It's typically not complimenting the neighbor's large structure they're putting in the
Right.
within 5 feet of their
And
property.
we were here last week, 2 weeks ago for 2 hours, listening to people who didn't like what the neighbors were gonna do.
Point taken. All right, I really appreciate the time and your comments, and we'll see how this progresses. We'll be back. Thank you.
It's my turn now. We gotta move on to the approval of the minutes from the May 25th, 2023 meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as prepared from the May 20.
Wait, there was something, sorry, something I was wanting changed, I think. Oh, I was talking about the, on the Black Desert, it's the Black Desert, yeah. I just wanted to add on the reasoning for wanting the reduced road cross section to be just to limit the disturbance to lava rocks.
Okay, so the reason you say that again, Commissioner?
When I read through it, it was meant, when I brought up reducing the road width from 50 to 45 was partly in to reduce the disturbance to lava rocks that are up there.
Okay.
And that wasn't mentioned in the
Okay,
minutes.
thank you
That was
for
where
that.
they noted your comments.
Yeah,
I will add that, and thank you for that, because these approved minutes will go as part of the staff report to the city council on June 21st when they're having their meeting, when they're going to be here available. And so we'll make sure that's included. We did have a meeting with Black Desert just today with the group, and that was one of the items that was discussed with city staff, the mayor, and others. And I think we're good with 45 feet going to the 45-foot public cross section, like you mentioned, which includes 30 feet of asphalt, 2.5 curb and gutter, 5-foot sidewalk on each side. Now, there is a portion of the road, as you know, Red Mountain Drive to that road E, that's a collector, that will be 66. And then as that road goes into, they call it Road C, and I just know the names because I was looking at the plat today, but they're not names yet. They're letters, right? Road C is the one that comes down, and then there's a match line that ties into the project itself. But they have gotten approval to do a golf cart path underneath the road on the bridge. So we're going to continue that section of Road C west of that bridge at 50 feet because there's going to be multifamily on either side there, and we want to make sure it can
And that-
park. And then when we get to the other side of the bridge, it transitions to the 45. The whole interior will be the 45.
That has more use
Yeah.
and that's,
Yeah.
that's getting out of Lava Rocks too at that point,
Yeah.
isn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, so everything that provides service east of the bridge and into the subdivision itself will be 45. The other stuff will be 50 until where it ties back to the collector.
Okay.
Just a transition, and I just wanted to explain that to you, and everybody liked that idea, including the developer. So,
No, that sounds good.
The developer also mentioned the parking that
Yeah.
16 hours will prohibit street parking. Did you cover that?
oh, yes, thank you. So they're going to prohibit street parking in the subdivision itself, similar to Entrada. So you're not going to see extra vehicles or a boat and RV on the street because of very high dollar development. So, yeah.
So my motion stands with
Okay.
the correction that
Yeah.
Logan.
We'll get that reflected in the minutes.
I'll second them.
Okay, we got a motion by Commissioner Harrison, second by Commissioner Call. All those in favor of the minutes?
Aye.
Minutes are approved.
Thank you.
And then we'll close this meeting until we re-adjourn in 2 weeks.
Yes, on the
2
22nd.
weeks. 22nd. Go ahead. Recording.